Division I is the highest level of intercollegiate athletics sanctioned by the National Collegiate Athletic Association in the United States. D.I. schools include the major collegiate athletic powers, with larger budgets, more elaborate facilities, and more athletic scholarships than Divisions II and III, as well as many smaller schools committed to the highest level of intercollegiate competition. This level was once called the University Division of the NCAA. In contrast to the lower-level college division, this terminology was replaced with numeric divisions in 1973. The University Division was renamed Division I, while the College Division was split in two. The College Division members that offered scholarships or wanted to compete against those who did became Division II, while those who did not want to offer scholarships became Division III. For football only, Division I was further subdivided in 1978 into Division I-A and Division I-AA. Those schools not sponsoring football remained as simply Division I. In 2006, Division I-A and I-A were renamed Football Bowl Subdivision and Football Championship Subdivision, respectively. FBS teams are allowed a maximum of 85 players receiving athletically based aid per year, with each player allowed to receive up to a full scholarship. FCS teams have the same 85-player limit as FBS teams, but are only allowed to give aid equivalent to 63 full scholarships. FCS teams are allowed to award partial scholarships, a practice technically allowed but essentially never used at the FBS level. FBS teams also have to meet minimum attendance requirements, while FCS teams do not need to meet minimum attendance requirements. Another difference is postseason play. Since 1978, FCS teams have played in a college football playoff system to determine a NCAA-sanctioned national champion. The FBS teams play in bowl games where various polls rank the number one team after the conclusion of the bowl games. Starting with the 2014 postseason, a four-team playoff called the College Football Playoff replaced the previous one-game championship format. Even so, Division I FBS football is still the only NCAA sport in which a yearly champion is not determined by an NCAA-sanctioned championship event. For the 2014-15 school year, Division I contained 345 of the NCAA's 1,066 member institutions, with 125 in FBS, 125 in FCS, and 95 non-football schools, with 6 additional schools in transition from Division II to Division I. There was a moratorium on any additional movement up to D.I. until 2012, after which any school that wants to move to D.I. must be accepted for membership by a conference and show the NCAA it has the financial ability to support a D.I. program. All D.I. schools must field teams in at least 7 sports for men and 7 for women, or 6 for men and 8 for women, with at least 2 team sports for each gender. Division I schools must meet minimum financial aid awards for their athletics program, and there are maximum financial aid awards for each sport that a Division I school cannot exceed. Several other NCAA-sanctioned minimums and differences that distinguish Division I from Divisions II and III. Each playing season has to be represented by each gender as well. There are contest and participant minimums for each sport, as well as scheduling criteria for sports other than football and basketball. Division I schools must play 100% of the minimum number of contests against Division I opponents. Anything over the minimum number of games has to be 50%. Division I men's and women's basketball teams have to play all but 2 games against Division I teams. For men, they must play 1/3 of all the contests in the home arena. In addition to the schools that compete fully as DI institutions. The NCAA allows D2 and D3 schools to classify one men's and one women's sport as a DI sport, as long as they sponsored those sports before the latest rules change in 2011. Also, Division II schools are eligible to compete for Division I national championships in sports that do not have a Division II national championship, and in those sports may also operate under DI rules and scholarship limits. Scholarship limits by sport. The NCAA has limits on the total financial aid each Division I member may award in each sport that the school sponsors. It divides sports that are sponsored into two types for purposes of scholarship limitations. Head count sports, in which the NCAA limits the total number of individuals that can receive athletic scholarships, but allows each player to receive up to a full scholarship. Equivalency sports, in which the NCAA limits the total financial aid that a school can offer in a given sport to the equivalent of a set number of full scholarships. Roster limitations may or may not apply, depending on the sport. The term counter is also key to this concept. The NCAA defines a counter as an individual who is receiving institutional financial aid that is countable against the aid limitations in a sport. The number of scholarships the Division I members may award in each sport is listed below. In this table, scholarship numbers for headcount sports are indicated without a decimal point. For equivalency sports, they are listed with a decimal point, with a trailing 0 if required. Rules for multi-sport athletes. The NCAA also has rules specifying the sport in which multi-sport athletes are to be counted, with the basic rules being, anyone who participates in football is counted in that sport, even if he does not receive financial aid from the football program. An exception exists for players at non-scholarship FCS programs who receive aid in another sport. Participants in basketball are counted in that sport, unless they also play football. Participants in men's ice hockey are counted in that sport, unless they also play football or basketball. Participants in both men's swimming and diving and men's water polo are counted in swimming and diving, unless they count in football or basketball. Participants in women's volleyball are counted in that sport, unless they also play basketball. All other multi-sport athletes are counted in whichever sport the school chooses. Finances. Division I athletic programs generated $8.7 billion in revenue in the 2009-2010 academic year. Men's teams provided 55%, women's teams 15%, and 30% was not categorized by sex as sport. Football and men's basketball are usually a university's only profitable sports, and are called revenue sports. The BYU Cougars, for example, in 2009 had revenue of $41 million and expenses of $35 million, resulting in a profit of $5.5 million, or about 16% margin. Football and men's basketball were profitable. Women's basketball and all other sports were unprofitable. From 2008 to 2012, 205 varsity teams were dropped in NCAA Division I, 72 for women and 133 for men, with men's tennis, gymnastics and wrestling hit particularly hard. In the Football Bowl subdivision, between 50 and 60% of football and men's basketball programs generated positive revenues. However, in the Football Championship subdivision, only 4% of football and 5% of men's basketball programs generated positive revenues. In 2012, 2% of athletic budgets were spent on equipment, uniforms and supplies for male athletes sponsored NCAA Division I football bowl subdivision school, with the median spending per school at $742,000. In 2014, the NCAA and the student-athletes debated whether student-athletes should be paid. Student-athletes felt the hard work, hours spent on the sport, and the money the sport brings in justify the payment. In April, the NCAA approved students-athletes getting free unlimited meals and snacks. The NCAA stated, the adoption of the meals legislation finished a conversation that began in the awards, benefits, expenses and financial aid cabinet. Members have worked to find appropriate ways to ensure student-athletes get the nutrition they need without jeopardizing Pell Grants or other federal aid received by the neediest student-athletes. With the vote, members of the council said they believe loosening NCAA rules on what and when food can be provided from athletics departments is the best way to address the issue. Overview. Men's team sports are ranked according to total possible scholarships. Scholarship numbers for headcount sports are indicated without a decimal point. Numbers for equivalency sports are indicated with a decimal point, with a trailing zero if needed. Notes: football, DI football programs are divided into FBS and FCS. The 128 FBS programs can award financial aid to as many as 85 players, with each player able to receive up to a full scholarship. The 124 FCS programs can award up to the equivalent of 63 full scholarships, divided among no more than 85 individuals. Some FCS conferences restrict scholarships to a lower level or prohibit scholarships altogether. Soccer, the Big 12 and the SEC are the only two major traditional DI conferences that do not sponsor soccer. Several other DI conferences also do not sponsor the sport. The Big Sky, MEAC, Mountain West, Ohio Valley, Southland, and SWAC. Ice hockey. Almost all DI ice hockey programs are in the Northeast, the Upper Midwest, or the Colorado Front Range. Only one DI all-sports conference, the Big Ten, sponsors a men's hockey league. All other conferences operate as hockey-specific leagues. Of the 59 DI hockey schools, 22 are otherwise classified as either D2 or D3. D2 has an insufficient number of schools to sponsor a separate divisional championship, and the D3 schools were grandfathered into DI through the having sponsored hockey prior to the creation of D3. Lacrosse. The vast majority of DI lacrosse programs are from the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. There are only two DI programs west of the Mississippi, both on the Colorado Front Range. Volleyball. None of the traditional DI conferences sponsor men's volleyball, although the Big West has announced it will begin sponsoring the sport in the 2017-18 school year. Two of the current three major volleyball conferences are volleyball-specific conferences. In addition to the DI schools, 26 D2 schools compete in DI volleyball. 11 of these are members of Conference Carolinas, the only all-sports league outside Division III to sponsor the sport. Water polo. The number of DI schools sponsoring men's water polo has declined from 35 in 1987-88 to 22 in 2010-11. No school outside of California has ever made the finals of the championship, and all champions since 1998 have come from one of the four California-based Pac-12 schools. Women's team sports. Notes: as in the men's table above, sports are ranked in order of total possible scholarships. Numbers for headcount sports are indicated without a decimal point. Those for equivalency sports are indicated with a decimal point, with a trailing zero if needed. Women's soccer is the fastest-growing NCAA-D-I women's team sport over a prolonged period, increasing from 22 teams in 1981-82 to 315 teams in 2010-11. However, in recent years, the fastest-growing has been beach volleyball, which went from 14 teams in 2011-12 to 47 in 2015-16, equals in the 2015-16 school year. Rugby is classified by the NCAA as an emerging sport for women. Beach volleyball, which had previously been an emerging sport under the name of sand volleyball, became an official NCAA championship sport in 2015-16. Equals the number of scholarships are partially linked for volleyball and beach volleyball. Schools that field both indoor and beach volleyball teams are allowed 6.0 full scholarship equivalents specifically for beach volleyball as of 2015-16, with the further limitations that no player receiving aid for beach volleyball can be on the indoor volleyball roster and a maximum of 14 individuals can receive aid in beach volleyball. If a school fields only a beach volleyball team, it is allowed 8.0 full scholarship equivalents for that sport, also distributed among no more than 14 individuals.